I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello and welcome to Season 35, Episode 5 of this, the Happy Jacks RPG Advice Podcast. I'm Jason.
And I'm Pooja.
In today's episode, we have emails from Clara. Yes, that Clara. Asks about intrigue and conspiracy in TTRPGs. Eric from New Jersey responds to the call for favorite systems. And from the archive, the way back machine of 2019, Al asks for advice for running games for kids with cognitive disabilities. Share with us, how did you get into TTRPGs? What did you play? If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com or post in the mailbag channel on the Discord. The next game days is March 29th. It's free and everyone is welcome to join via the happyjacks.org/Discord link. There's always a huge, great variety of games, and it is basically a little online con. It's like a 1 or 2 day, it's people sign up to run whenever. There's all kinds of time. So I'm a huge fan of this. I barely get to participate in these, but I love that they exist. So
Same.
Yeah. Our indie designer of the month is Sam Dunwald, he, him. You can find his work on sdunwald.itch.io/dice or diceexploder.com, and you can find them at diceexploder.com on Blue Sky. That's a pretty great podcast, actually, about like game mechanics and all kinds of stuff, so highly recommend. Sam's a cool dude. Today's game, however, we're highlighting Space Train, Space Heist. All of those words are in there. Space Train, Space Heist. Rocketing across the solar system at record-breaking speeds is the Titanic Express, the fastest luxury space train ever created by humankind. You and your crew have set your sights on this, its maiden voyage, as the perfect time for the heist of the millennium. Gather your crew, figure out your target, and hold on to your butts as you dive face first into Space Train, Space Heist. A high-octane, single-session, GM-less, forged-in-the-dark goof of a game for 3 to 5 players about space robbing a space train. That's all those are important modifiers.
It is very important.
It was designed with the goal of creating a game based on Blades in the Dark that can be learned quickly and played in a single session by people who have never played a Forged in the Dark game before. It is $5 at sdunwald.itch.io.
And that's SDUNNEWOLD.
Yes.
.itch.io.
Yes. Okay. We've got mailbags.
Yes.
You want to launch us?
Oh, I'm very excited about
Okay.
this. It tickles me greatly.
This is a new listener, I think. Mailbag one.
First, it's hi to me. Hi to Pooja, longtime host, first-time asker. Love the show. Everyone seems really hot, and at least one of y'all has a great personality. It's Kimmy. It's Kimmy.
We know.
I thought about figuring out how to make this question anonymous, but I'm too lazy, so I'm just going to ask it as myself. I find I have really enjoyed games with political intrigue and social skills or maneuvering. For my part, I'm not always good at untangling these sorts of plot lines, but I like that they are often more rewarding for people who lean into learning game lore and background skills, and can be solved separately from the pass-fail binary that can stop players from getting through more physical challenges, like locked doors and waves of monsters. Figuring out social network politics can be a thing that all players can engage in, even if they have a low charisma score. Also, like in our world, not every problem is caused by a physical attack, and therefore having narratives and plots that hinge on intrigue just make for diverse storytelling. Unfortunately, I find that a lot of people struggle making these kinds of games happen, both on the GM side and the player side. For GMs, I think the struggle is that historically, the TTRPG format is focused far more on hitting things to solve problems. Insert D&D here. So there just isn't a robust background of resources to lean on talking about how to make political intrigue successful in plots and gaming. This leads to games of VTM, where the plots revolve around punching werewolves, as opposed to utilizing the lore and world building to make tangled webs of favors and cat's paws, the way the source material seems to imply at once. For players, the hit things mindset can make non-combat challenges and one-off skill challenges seem scary or confusing. I have more often than not seen the face character know their job is to talk, but that doesn't extend to the ability to know the right questions to ask or map or understand a network of favors and alliances. I don't know, is there any hope for conspiracy and intrigue in TTRPGs? What systems or games have other jackers played that have done social combat well? Am I just a lone, silly, paranoid goblin who wants to make conspiracy boards? Cheeky sign-off. Clara, who is hopefully in the room with you right now, from Los Angeles. Forever in the room with us in our hearts.
Yes, Clara is not here today. If you're just listening, Clara is not here. Probably, I guess. I don't think Clara is here. Clara, are you in the room with us now?
I checked the corners before we started, just in case.
Okay, yeah. Doors and corners. Okay. So, boy, there's a lot of layers to this. Any initial thoughts?
My first thought is that I think, yeah, it is harder for people to make a game which relies on social intrigue and those kinds of tangled webs, in large part because it requires a lot more upfront time investment to learn all the lore. And in the case of, like, a lot of different games, you're not working with established places and like, you can read thousands of pages about Vampire the Masquerade and its lore for different cities and the overarching lore and all of that kind of stuff, and it's really rewarding to do so, in my opinion. But it's not always a thing that's accessible to a lot of people for a lot of different systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then a lot of systems don't have that kind of stuff baked in.
Yeah.
So if you're not used to going through that kind of, like, prep work, then it can be a lot harder. And if you and you do have to have, like, at least a large portion, if not the whole table, invested in doing so.
Yeah.
Or you just end up having, like, all the political intrigue being for one player at your table.
Yeah, and that gets really hard. I think part of it too, obviously this is not all game systems, but the 800-pound gorilla in the room is Dungeons and Dragons. And if you look at it, if you sort of, like, zoom out and abstract the rules of the game, like, what are the rules for the game? Most of the rules are about fighting and doing damage. That's what most of the rules are about. And so that might lead you to think, like, oh, well, this game is only about fighting. And I don't think anyone would be faulted for skewing that way.
Mm-hmm.
And
a lot of D&D and Pathfinder campaigns, because I feel like we need to include Pathfinder in this.
Yeah.
Whereas I haven't played 2E, I did have a 7-year home game of it.
Okay.
And it was mostly fighty. It was 90% fighty and 10% we were goblins.
Yeah.
Like, we were just, like, total gremlin players. So
I mean,
it's not just D&D, but that is the one that people always think about, and for a good reason.
when you sit down and make a character, and this is true, I think, in Vampire as well, almost everything you're picking is, like, how to not get killed.
That's very much not true for Vampire.
Okay. So, in Dungeons and Dragons, it's certainly skewed that way. And I know we'll go with my baby, Shadowrun, right? Which I do not defend as a good game, but I think it's an important game and a useful game to understand. And I don't encourage anyone to go don't get 6th edition. It's absolute trash. But if you can get your hand on a 5th edition rulebook, it's an eminently playable game. The Shadowrun certainly does this thing where it's like, here's all these combat skills and here's your 4 social skills, right? And it has a bunch of stuff built out of like, here's what to do in a negotiation, and you go up by 5% on a success. And, you know, there's a bunch of stuff laid out there, and you do it, and that might be part of your campaign. But even if you have your face and they have the greatest time and they're doing all that, it's going to be like an hour of the session at most, because then when we get into a fight later, that's 3 hours of session, right? Like the combat just naturally takes longer because it's complicated, because you'll die if it doesn't
If
go
it goes
right,
badly.
right?
Yeah.
And most social situations, you don't die of embarrassment, really. Unless you have offended someone and it turns into combat, but now we're in combat, which you have to be able to win, even though you're geared to be a face.
I mean, I'm just saying the number of times where, like, I have felt my entire being try to melt into the floor from the things that have come out of my mouth. I don't know. Feels like you could die of embarrassment.
But you can't. I'm just saying, like, I understand why people sit down to any game and they're like, okay, I want my character to live, right? How do I live so that I can keep doing social interactions, right?
Yeah.
Because so many games are built around combat in general, and, you know, what are you going to do with that? Like, I have definitely made characters where I was like, okay, I want to get in there. I'm going to break out of this combat cycle. I'm going to make a character who's all about social shit. And guess what? You could still fail a roll. And if you fail a roll, you might be in combat. And now you're in combat.
And I will say, though, that, like, this actually, I don't know why, but this just, the dying of embarrassment thing reminded me of a home game, a short campaign, maybe like 6 sessions we ran of Monster Hearts and nary a combat in the entire campaign. But, like, it was needing to untangle some webs and all of that stuff, like, on a smaller scale, more of like a Hardy Boys Nancy Drew style situation. We had taken out some stuff that some of our players were uncomfortable with as part of the game, so it was a little less risque than some games Monster Hearts can be. But, like, it was very much about navigating the network of people in the town that we were in and figuring out things through those relationships rather than trying to beat your way through. And the same is true. This is an interesting point, because, like, in terms of games that rely more on social skills, they tend to be games that are where you're playing a younger protagonist. Because Monster Hearts can have that. Masks, Mask has a lot of combat in it, but it also has a lot of skills and an emphasis on social interactions and interactions between players.
But all that combat in Masks is not going to end up in your death.
Yes.
Right? It is the combat that has, rather than damage, you are, like, embarrassed, right? Or angry, or, you know, you take emotional damage.
But even, like, Kids on Bikes, where you could die.
Yeah.
Has a lot more social skills as part of the base aspects of the game, and a lot more of the gameplay is focused on social interactions and social constructions and figuring out a mystery that way. Tales from the Loop. It's not to say you're never going to be in a situation where you're in combat, but in games that are where you're playing younger protagonists, the emphasis is taken away a lot from hit things to solve your problems.
Yeah.
And more into, like, actually having to use soft skills.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing that, like...
Oh, you know, that it makes me think about horror games as well, which we were debating. I don't know if you were there that night, but, like, we were talking about horror games a few episodes ago, and we locked onto the idea of, like, it's about, you know, feeling a sense of agency, and having that in-game sense of agency taken away is part of what feeds into horror, right?
Absolutely.
Like, feeling like you're out of control. And okay, so that's cool and interesting to try to capture. My beef with most horror games is at some point it's going to come down to a die roll, and like that's less scary. Like even if I'm going to fail the die roll, okay, I had some agency, I had some power over it. Like I have trouble maintaining the horror vibe during a game like that.
I will say, like, to me, the best situations in horror games are like, yes, your stuff comes down to a die roll, like, but also a lot of things that say, like, even in Delta Green, where you're like much more likely to be in combat at some point during the game than something like a Call of Cthulhu, your die rolls are not about like having like a huge because having your sense of agency eroded,
Yeah.
or having things that are taking you like that where you should be able to do something and you know you're going to be able to do it, and the possibility of failure there and like what that failure can mean is such a big part of horror gaming to me, that because your agency isn't an all or nothing thing, and a lot of those like failed die rolls, when you like it's like almost a gimme but not, you're not quite at the level where you would just like not roll for it because you're good at this.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things can be interesting because it's like the way that like going through this experience is undermining your sense of self.
Yeah.
And it's removing the capabilities that you had and going through the experience. And I think, I don't know, it's not that like, I don't want to say like, oh, most people don't understand that about horror. I just think it's a really hard thing to play.
Right. So that was kind of my point, but it just occurred to me that it's similar to having a game about underage, like kid characters, because a lot of their story is about them not being in control of their world, right? Like there's so many things that outrank them in every aspect of life, just physical size. Every adult can tell you what to do. All that kind of stuff is stuff to wrestle with. And it's interesting that feels like a parallel with horror stories. And it feels like a place where you have to do social combat, because physical combat is off the table.
Yep.
So that's really interesting. But, I can't help but notice, it feels like, with the exception of Vampire at least, it and I will say it's still my impression of Vampire that like there are more combat abilities than non-combat abilities, and I might be wrong about that. All right,
it's just not actually true.
Okay.
It's just not actually true.
Okay, so I'm wrong about that, but that's the impression I've gotten from it from people who play Vampire, right? Like every time I've ever made the 3 times I've made a Vampire character, and the people I played with were all hyper focused on combat. So
and that is a thing that you see a lot in VTM.
Yeah.
And to Clara's point, and to many a conversation I've had with different people who are into Vampire, that the base of Vampire as a system, you can go either way. Obviously, a lot of people have very combat heavy, successful Vampire the Masquerade campaigns, and I'm not shitting on those. But you're leaving a lot on the table if you don't explore the intrigue side of it. But like, because politics and systems and webs of favors and all of that stuff can be complicated and take a lot of time to set up.
Mm-hmm.
Because combat is kind of an instant gratification situation, whereas if you're setting up things where people are like having to have like one-on-one discussions and little mini scenes within a session where like maybe not everybody is actually involved in that, or like maybe and especially in Vampire, a thing that I don't see explored a lot is at the beginning of the game when you're creating your characters, you create these like, not just the relationship questions aren't just about like how y'all know each other, but also about like, okay, who's like, what are our goals as a coterie? And how do our individual goals align and not align and set us against each other there? And you don't see a lot of inner table,
Yeah.
like, it's not, but like social PvP that way. Like things that are going at cross purposes.
It also, I have a sense of, in a game where, so setting aside the like kid games, the like games that are specifically designed for social stuff, but like Shadowrun, D&D, the version of VTM that's in my head, right? The experiences that I've had with that.
Yes. And I'm not saying that it's not real. That's definitely not
I know.
the case.
I'm happy to know that objectively, it's not the case that there are more combat abilities than social abilities. But it occurs to me that if we're talking about building out a social web and having contacts and contacts who know contacts and all that kind of stuff, it does feel like that puts more than usual work onto the shoulders of the GM. Like the GM has a larger task of maintaining these webs, especially if these two players are talking to these people and these three players are talking to another group of people, and I have to like manage all of that behind the scenes. I wonder if people don't shy away from this just because the GM is like, I don't have the overhead to do this.
I find this so incredibly interesting because I find that kind of narrative stuff so much easier to keep track of and deal with than like building combats. Building combats to me is difficult. Managing combats is difficult. Figuring out like, okay, I've got 7 different groups of people and here are all their motivations and here's how they're going to react to things is actually so much easier.
I think that is objectively more complicated.
Like it's so funny that like this, and this comes down to a style thing.
I think
and how
that's
our
your
brains work.
superpower. Like that, I think we have to admit that is an incredible ability that you have. That, like, I enjoy having all of that stuff, but I've had so many instances where, like, I did set up all these factions, and then they just kick the door in, and they don't care about it, and so I've stopped putting energy into that until a player says, "What about this faction?" I'm like, "Oh, I've got stuff for you," but that's also because I have 30 years of GMing experience, more than that. So I can freestyle that a little bit just because I have 11 different cults in the back of my head, secret societies and agencies, and
And that's part of it too, is that getting into conspiracy and intrigue in your game, it doesn't have to be 15 different layers and da-da-da-da-da. If you have, like, kind of a little stable of stuff that people do or do not engage with, that is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to not create the full quilt, like, wall-sized conspiracy board. It can be the 11 by 17 conspiracy board, and that can still be really satisfying for players and can still be really satisfying for a GM without creating all this extra work that can be like a massive onus on the GM to manage and keep track of and continually iterate on. And yeah, like, I don't think that Clara is alone.
no.
Clara is not the lone, silly, paranoid goblin who wants to make conspiracy boards. It's just that, I think for a lot of us, like, crafting those kinds of narratives can be more difficult.
Yeah. Okay, well, I feel like we got a lot out of that.
Oh, yeah.
We solved it. Okay, Clara, you're welcome. Okay, I'll start us off on this one and then hand it off. We got a long one here. And Eric from New Jersey, we love you. Please don't stop sending these.
Forever write us your long letters.
Yes, yeah. And hey, the mail channel is open. Please send us your emails, send us your Discord message. The mailbag is what I was trying to say. The mailbag is open. Dear,
Someone send me their how they're going to incorporate How to Lose the Time War inspired setting into a TTRPG and which system you would choose. Give it to me. Give it to me.
The Time War. Okay. Interesting. Dear Kimmy and insert names of other hosts here since I'm not psychic and don't know who they will be. I just like saying that better.
It's good. It's very good. Also, I don't believe you are from New Jersey. Totes psychic.
Greetings from the fabled Garden State of New Jersey. No, seriously, we are the Garden State, especially as you move away from the areas next to New York City and Philadelphia, unless you happen on a stretch of highway with endless strip malls, or you end up at a diner. I mean, focus, Eric. That's not me editorializing. Eric wrote that. There has been a call to ask about favorite systems and why. This is a rather difficult question, as I would postulate that the table of people is far more important than the system being played, and those people at the table have had a far better effect on my enjoyment than the mechanical rules we should be following. On top of that, there are different categories of favorite, as games like Masks scratch a very different itch than Savage Worlds, and many games are wonderful and the best for different reasons. I agree with all of that so far. That being said, I'm going to give this a shot anyway.
Yes.
Yes, kudos. Now, considering I have written in defending Savage Worlds, you would think I would go there. However, while it is the system I run the most, and I do truly enjoy it, Jason, exploding dice are a feature, not a bug. Yeah,
Psychic.
They're a feature that solves a bug, but okay, that's fine. I would say it is my favorite system. It's my favorite, most versatile system, running pulpy, sci-fi, or gritty modern. But enough about that game, except for the fact that if Erica Odd doesn't send in an email about it, something is cosmically wrong with the universe. Yes,
Yeah,
Erica,
also,
where is
yeah.
your email? I'd like to take you down a path that Kadave would happily follow into Sweden. I also would like to go to Sweden and just live there. There you will find Free League Publishing and a game that Kadave doesn't really talk about among his Free League addiction. I'd like to welcome you to the Forbidden Lands. Do you want to take it from there?
Sure. Forbidden Lands is a post-apocalyptic fantasy game. There was a blood mist for a few hundred years at night. If you went out, you were probably never seen again. This caused towns to be very isolated, and people didn't travel more than a half day from their hometown. Then, one day, the blood mist vanished. Now people are starting to explore. Into this comes your adventuring party. Explorers into this world where things like communication and trade were at a standstill. Life is still dangerous. You could be eaten, or piss off some undead Lich King.
Oh my god.
Who will send people to eat you. Heck, you could die starving and alone, covered by lice in the middle of the woods. It's just one of those things.
And then you get eaten.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things that could eat you in this situation, I feel like. I played this game for the first time a few years ago, and it gave me the sensation I had when I first played D&D in 1981. That was before I was born.
Rude. Move on.
There was a sense of wonder and exploration that no other game had really hit me with. It was amazing to feel that way again. The world is open and very player-driven, and while different phrasing is used, it basically implores the GM to play to find out. There are character relations, and fighting is in zones. However, the game has a certain crunch to it, allowing people who really enjoy the G in RPG to have their moments along with the role-playing.
Okay.
I'm hearing like that siren call to GURPS people right now.
Yeah.
Like I previously said, though, a lot of this has to do with the group that assembled to play it. Since I am paranoid of leaving someone out, I am going to only mention 2 people. Uncommon Man was our GM and was brilliant at exposing our shades of gray morality.
I like exploding better.
Their favorite tactic was to drop magic items of questionable morality into our laps and see how we would react. As a group, we were contentious and didn't see eye to eye on a lot. I played an elf who absolutely hated humans, still remembering a war he was in against them that was ancient history to humans. It was a wonderful redemption arc to play. The other player was Dirk, who was the heart of the group. Dirk's character, Orden the Elven Druid, had a compassionate morality coupled with some common sense.
Okay.
What?
Yep.
What?
Interesting.
Like, as much as we hated a group called the Rust Brothers, did we really want to be hiding necromancers from them? The answer, it turned out later, was, oh, heck no. The game primarily stopped after Dirk passed away.
Oh,
Sorry for y'all's loss.
that's hard.
Forbidden Lands is the next game I have slotted up to run a campaign in. There will always be a druid named Orden in my future campaigns. Anyway, there you go. I hope you enjoyed my take on Forbidden Lands. As always, stay happy, stay tipsy, stay diverse. Mugs held high. Eric from New Jersey.
Cheers.
What do you think?
I mean, I want to play it.
I know,
Yeah.
me too.
This is a great argument for your favorite. Like, I'm never going to tell someone they're wrong for their favorite. You know, like, Shadowrun is not my favorite game because it's not good, but I love it, right? Like, that feeling, no one can tell me I'm wrong that I love Shadowrun. Like, it is problematic, it's clunky, it's, like, overbuilt, it's everything, like, in my game, I had a little page of, like, thank you to these games that came before. Shadowrun was on that list, but, like, that paragraph ended with, many of these games were inspiring me to make the thing I wanted to make. Some of them acted as a list of things not to do in a game.
Yep.
And Shadowrun was a big part of that list. But it is also my first love, and I will never give it up. So, like, yeah, what your favorite, like, we want to know your favorites. Like, write that stuff in and just be like, here's why I love this game. Yeah. I was also talking to somebody today, like, it almost doesn't matter what somebody wants to talk to me, but like if you're a stamp collector and you have fire in the belly for stamps and you want to tell me about it, I'm in for that conversation. I'm not going to start collecting stamps with you, but I love that you love it and I want to hear how much you love it and what you love about it. So, like, if somebody wants to come in and tell me they love Savage Worlds more than anything, I don't love Savage Worlds. That's okay. We get to like different things. More Savage Worlds for you. I will not be taking away your Savage World.
And that's, I think, a big thing about, like, people's favorites or games they enjoy playing. It's like, unless that person is a person who is trying to get, like, constantly try to get you to play a game that you hate, like, let people enjoy things.
Yeah.
Let people enjoy things is kind of where where I'm getting with this.
Yeah.
Everyone is allowed to love these things that kind of suck or whatever, as long as they're not trying to force them on you.
Right. Or if they're not so deeply problematic.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously, like, bigotry is bigotry, and
Right.
let's all have less of that.
Yeah. But there is a level of, like, all your faves are problematic.
Mm-hmm.
And if we just gave up on, or we're trying to put everything to this litmus purity test, like, it's fine. Let's go in eyes open, acknowledge when something is a problem, and like, but some problems we could go, okay, this does not exempt it from existence, right? That's fine. We can move on and still enjoy it for what it is.
Exactly. And there's all kinds of, like, stuff we could talk about in terms of, you know, death of the author and all that, but not the point. The point is that this Forbidden Lands sounds like so much fun. I also love the kinds of, like, so this is a game from Sweden and you've got that kind of, like, Western European, like, that northern Nordic vibes that I was getting in my head. But I also think this would be super interesting to set, like, in Louisiana.
Modern day.
Like, so you have the idea that you're in the swamp where it is already hard to travel around, like, not modern day. It would be even more interesting if it was, like, you know, kind of post-apocalyptic and all of that.
Well, I meant like post-apocalyptic of 2025. Like,
Yeah.
the Blood Mist came out, and that's cut off all internet and phone and...
Yes, exactly. And, like, so we're 200 years in the future, and we've had this blood mist.
Yeah.
And then you're in this zone. You're in this area where travel is super dangerous and was already dangerous. And you've been having to deal with all of these, like, different natural disasters that happen every year.
Yeah. You know what else is fun about it? I was about to say, like, anything that gives me the oxen pulling of like car, right? Of like whatever, right? That's the future from Fallout. This is the big thing in Fallout. But it's interesting to have something like the Blood Mist, because if that goes away, there's no like nuclear radiation, you know, there's no residue. There is this like whatever undead, like all that kind of shit happening, and we have to reckon with a world that didn't believe in magic. Blood Mist turned up, and we're, you know.
And what came out of that? Like, how does that change, like, the systems of belief from town to town? How does that impact, like, relationships between different communities?
Yeah. I would even want to say, like, if I was doing modern day, you know, North America, something, I would want to say the Blood Mist was only there for, like, 50 years. So you have old timers who remember, but all the young people are like, we've always been in the Blood Mist, and now it's gone. Okay. Old timers, you were telling us about the good old days. Where are they? Please show me your good old days.
Bring on the good old days. We're ready.
Yes, that sounds nice. May we have them, please.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It also just makes me really happy to think of, like, I mean, it's just all the things that could eat you.
Yeah.
In different parts of the world.
Yeah, especially if we're saying the Blood Mist is going to take all of our cryptid storylines and amp all of that up.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah, there's just tons of terrifying things that could happen there. Yeah, this was great. Thank you for writing in, Eric. This is...
Just sounds like so much fun. And
Yeah.
even if you, like, I mean, obviously the original setting sounds great. Jason and I are just people who love to, like, take things and twist them into our...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, this is awesome. There was something in here I was going to make a snide remark about, and now I can't remember what it was.
Well, you did get called out.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, Eric's not wrong. He's correctly assessed how I feel about things. But, well, not quite actually. It's not the exploding dice I have a problem with. It's the just add a d6 into it. You roll your attribute and your skill and a d6, I guess. It's the wild die, because they knew that it wasn't working. Like, the success curve was bad. So they're like, yeah, put a wild die in it, I guess. That'll fix it. And it does, kinda, but that's the part I don't like. Exploding dice are great. Shadowrun used to have exploding dice. That was the best.
I do enjoy an exploding dice situation as much as, like, I feel like you start to get into, like, hardcore math territory in a way that I'm so bad at doing on the spot, as evidenced by our last game of D&D.
Yeah. We actually just had a whole thing on my stream yesterday, Friday. Yeah. Sam DeLev was on. We're designing my dragon game that I've been working on for a while, and I had Sam come on because I need collaborators. I just work better in small groups. So we went down this rabbit hole of like, okay, here's how I want the dice system to work. All right, if that's happening, it seems like there might be a little problem with advantage-disadvantage mechanic. Right? Like, how are we going to do that? Normally, when you're rolling 2 dice, like in PBTA, you could say, add a third die and take the better 2, or the worst 2. And that works out to about +2, -2, and that's fine. That's about what you'd want from an advantage-disadvantage mechanic. That also, you're rolling the dice so it feels like it's a big gamble. I really like that in PBTA. And we're doing this other thing. This is going to be 2d8. But rather than, you're not supposed to roll as high as you can. You're supposed to hit the middle, right? So 7 to 11 is the success range. And it turns out, this is really funny to me and probably nobody else. If you're familiar with anydice.com, it's a really great tool to go and test your dice mechanics. It did not have a method built in to say, roll 3 dice and take the 2 that are closest to 9. Right? So Sam and I are both coders, and like suddenly we're breaking out Python and we're mapping lists and like it. So my gut feeling that like, oh, if we roll 2d8 and take the 2 closest to 9 or the 2 furthest from 9, is that it feels like, I don't know if that's going to work out. You want to know what it came out to? So normal chance of success with no bonuses is about 53%.
Uh-huh.
Normal chance of success with advantage in that, 80%.
Oh my god.
Chance of failure on disadvantage, your chance of success on disadvantage, 12%.
Ouch.
30% up, 40% down, garbage. We can't do that,
That's
right? Like,
so. Also, I'm not gonna lie, purely on a like intrinsic, oh god, if I have to do that during play perspective, is
Yeah.
like my eyes just went like cross.
however, Demigods fans will be happy to learn that like what I wanted advantage disadvantage to do will be accomplished with doubles. When you roll doubles, you get a thing. Like, yeah, it was just so funny that like, because Sam also, I was like, Sam, what are we gonna do for advantage disadvantage? It feels like this might be a little off, right? In my head, I was like, oh, it's gonna feel like +5 -5. No, how about plus 30%? Oh, what?
Plus 30 minus 40.
Yeah. Yeah. and it's because I'm going for the middle of that spike, right?
Yes.
And so the top of that mountain is this wide, the bottom of the mountain is this wide. And it just if you're rolling and you're trying to get closest to 9 and you take your 2 best dice, no, if you take your 2 worst dice, it is impossible to get a total of 9. Think about that for a sec.
I'm just gonna believe you.
Yeah.
The viewers and listeners don't have enough time for me to figure this out in my head.
Yeah. It was so clunky and bad. And it was just horrible. So anyway, that was not good. But it was good that we fixed this on day 1 of let's sort out, like, here is roughly what I want the dice to do. And Sam and I put our heads together, and Sam actually did the majority of the coding because my coding brain just went offline in the middle of this conversation. I was like, but Sam's brilliant and
They're
managed
fantastic.
to bring that home. So that was a lot
But
of
that's
fun.
the other thing that's so fun about like game design is that so many game designers are so good at like massaging the system and the dice rolling and like how those different things work out. Because even within PBTA systems, even within Forge of the Dark systems, like everybody puts their little spin on it. And you can really feel it.
Mm-hmm.
As a player who doesn't understand statistics, failed that course in college.
It's not for everybody. You have to really want it, right? To like care about it and dig into it, because it's not a natural thing to want to know.
Yeah. And then seeing people be able to tweak it in the way that you're able to explain it in a way that I do understand, I love that. Thank you for that.
I also have the opinion that not enough game designers put enough thought into what their dice do. Because it would have been really easy to say, okay, we're rolling 2d8. Yeah, roll 3d8 and take the 2 closest to 9. And not think about the fact that, like, or not test it enough.
Yeah.
To see what am I getting out of this?
Playtesting, so essential. Because even if you aren't running the statistics and math side of it early,
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing I think would be really become really obvious really quickly
Yeah.
during playtesting.
Yeah, I'm really critical of systems that don't playtest enough. Now, that's a point of privilege. I happen to have a really big community that I can playtest stuff with at any time, and that's great.
Yeah, and the Strategicon is in Los Angeles
Yes.
and really easily accessible to us.
But, like, you got to playtest your stuff. Let's move on to Mailbag 3.
Yes.
Anyway. From the archive, 2019. Greetings, Jackers. Drink, puff, or partake of your favorite delivery system. Old school DM here, looking for advice for a project I have been gently barnswoggled into. That's a great word.
That's a good word.
A player from my games in the 70s contacted me. That's cool.
That's
In
so
2019,
awesome.
just 100 years later, approximately. He is working in a facility for children with cognitive disabilities and was thinking about how to introduce RPGs to kids who are not proficient readers, who also have deficits in communication and motor skills. Of course, this perked up the intellectual challenge nodes. The possibilities to me were endless. Obviously, D&D or Mathfinder. Pathfinder 1 was
Yep.
D&D
Oh.
3.75, and you know that's true. Like,
I feel like originally at least when I started playing Pathfinder, we were all like, yeah, it's iterative on 3.5, and that was the point.
yeah, because and it was a response to 4th edition,
Yes.
right? Of like, we don't like 4th edition. 3.5 needed some work, but it only needed a little work, which I think was the original Pathfinder. And now I understand 2E has stepped away from that quite a bit. Great, they're doing their own thing. I haven't played it. I won't comment on it. I mean, I'm running a D&D campaign right now, so what am I going to say shit about anything? Okay, so, yeah, Mathfinder was great. Would be a big ask to teach. Oh, yeah, also because D&D and Mathfinder, like, there's so much reading to, like, just know what your spell does. And then
how to use it, and then all of the skills, and they're just really complicated systems
Yeah.
for somebody with like especially reading impairments to be able to process in a short amount of time.
Yep. And the added pressure of sitting there at a table in front of your peers who are waiting for you to take their turn so they can take their turn, and for a fair number of folks with cognitive disabilities, waiting for your turn is part of the challenge. Like, just that sort of behavioral aspect is difficult, right? Like, legitimately a challenge. Okay, so there are some games that are geared for a younger audience. These are early days, and I would be interested in your views on existing products. At the same time, I was thinking about how to put in what I think are new ideas. Instead of rolling dice to slay the dragon, perhaps a Knight of Letters, K-N-I, Knight of Letters, could have to beat the dragon by spelling words. A 5-letter word might do 5 HP of damage, or a simple arithmetic problem could substitute for dice. I have some thoughts about that. We'll move on. A simple template of good guys versus the fill in the blanks could be easily reskinned to be a Western or a space opera or a fantasy, or even be used to roleplay situations they may encounter. If you would like, I can update you as I work on this project. Once I have taken the bait, I either have to do the project or figure some creative way to disappear. Signed, Al from Nowhere.
Well, considering this person from the 70s contacted you, I'm not sure about the disappearing part. Hopefully it went well.
Yeah, and this was 6 years ago. Al, if you're still listening to the show, would love to know how this evolved for you. But let's see. So thoughts that I might have. This is great. Also, like, today was my first day volunteering at the library for the D&D group, which is like 6th to 8th graders.
Oh, that's adorable.
There were 5 tables of 5 to 6 kids each in one big room.
That's
And
so many children.
it was loud. but it was also only 2 hours. So on one hand, I didn't have to do it for very long. On the other hand, we didn't have very long to do it.
Yeah,
So-
like that's a lot of children for a very short amount of time.
Right. And we got through a little fight at my table, and we had a good time. Everyone was having fun. But it was like, just like white knuckling through, like you're the passenger in Dom Toretto's Charger. Like,
Oh, I can only imagine.
okay, so a couple things I would say here. The pressure for somebody with cognitive challenges of spell this word to do damage to the thing on the spot
Yeah.
feels bad. And like, I wouldn't want to put that pressure on a neurotypical child.
And the same with the arithmetic. It's like dice are already a simple arithmetic problem.
Right. And it's also, suddenly I'm saying, if you, Pooja, are bad at spelling, your character is bad at fighting. Right? Like,
Yeah.
that's my only really...
I mean, it does feel like, in the defense of this idea, that it's like, okay, you would have a special subclass if, say, like, you are having a problem with the dice aspect of it and
Right.
doing those
Yeah.
and doing that math versus, like, so it's as a substitute in like a specific class rather than a one size fits all.
That's true. And I didn't mean to say, like, this is garbage. I just mean, like, potential challenges from the point of view of an educator.
But even if I were good at spelling, the idea of like having to spell on the spot and then figure out the number of letters and like I'm like, what's the longest word I can
Yeah.
spell? Like, which I think a lot of people would be really good at, but then also you have to run into the possibility that like you have a kid who just did like 13 to 15 points of damage because they can spell like a really long word.
Socioeconomic, like, yeah. And that's actually my superpower. I don't know if I've talked about it much on the show. I'm dyslexic and an incredible speller. And I don't know why that is.
That's
But
fantastic.
apparently, not everybody closes their eyes and sees the letters in 30-foot high white block letters.
Oh, that's fantastic.
When I
love
close
that.
my eyes, I can just see the word that I want to spell.
Oh, that's so cool.
So I thought I was cheating for a long time, and I was. Oh, by the way, second grade spelling champion at North Shore North Shore Elementary School. I don't remember. Well, what year was I in second grade?
The math is happening.
There's no way to know. Okay, so yeah, I think these are a number of really interesting ways to try to do that. And I think if it's from the point of view of like, hey, I'm a kid who like I'm challenged with different things, but I am good at spelling and I'm bad at like looking at these dice and adding them together and getting to the end result, but I am good at spelling, then yes, give them the letter night. And now I understand what this is doing.
I would also say, like, it's a really interesting idea to, like, look at your group and then identify what people's actual challenges are. Like, what are these kids, what are each of these kids actually, like, where are they in this spectrum of, like, because there are so many different things that fall under this umbrella of, like, cognitive disabilities. So it's like, what are the specific things that they're dealing with, and then adapting for those kids is such a big part of it. And like, because cognitive disabilities, just like any other disability, aren't a monolith. There isn't a one size fits all option.
Right. That's a really important point.
And so something that'll work really well, like you pointed out with the Knight of Letters, like something that would work really well for one kid isn't necessarily going to work at all for another kid. And then this is like, in terms of systems that would work, like a lot of the PBTA systems, we bring up maths a lot on the show, but I really love maths for a number of reasons. And one of those reasons is that a lot of the things in the playbooks can be distilled down very easily to explain to people in simple terms. And like even simplified further than what they are, and you can kind of like condense them down pretty easily to reduce the amount of reading that the kid's going to have to do in order to understand their class and like the system in general. And PBTA systems tend to have less need to really dive into a lot of reading in order to be able to play them.
I'm going to push back on that a little bit, or at least I have what I think is a controversial suggestion. And of course, yeah, the expanse of cognitive ability is so difficult to try to cover. Like, I wish we could know a little bit more specific. Like, most schools that are, specifically working on this have a like core area that they're really good at. Like we work with kids who are struggling with reading, or we work with kids who are struggling at math, or we work with kids who struggle with communicating, or, like there's so many different things, and it's hard to be good at all of those things. But as much as I love PBTA, it can be a lot of reading. So like maybe we have to, it feels like it could end up being a lot of work trying to distill all those things down. But it's also not a lot of reading when you compare it to like the rule book of a PBTA game versus Dungeons and Dragons. But the controversial thing I want to say is I actually think D&D has a leg up in this fight because of the level of support and accessibility that has floated out for it. Like the web support, the searchability, the support of, using the website to just like click on your ability. It rolls everything for you.
That's true. That's true.
Which it's not intuitive to think maybe this is good because there's so much stuff on the screen and like.
I will say, I mean, this is a thing that makes me think of like if you have kids with like challenges in motor skills, having a tablet with a dice roller can make a huge difference. Where all you have to do is hit the tablet and it rolls your dice for you.
And adds them up for you.
And
or
adds
whatever.
them up for you. And then if you add another level where like it's got a screen reader like setting enabled, so it is telling you what the result is rather than the kid having to read what the result is.
Right.
Like or not just for that one child who's rolling, but like so the entire table can be included at each point.
Yeah.
Because that's another layer of it, right? Is like to have things in a sense that you're still playing with a group and you want each member of that group to feel included.
Yeah.
And to your point about like where it can be hard for kids to sit and wait for their turn.
Mm-hmm.
That like simplifying that process to make turns take as little time as possible.
Yeah. And, even today, volunteering, there was a really big age gap between a couple of the kids. And one of them, I'm not going to go around diagnosing people with ADHD, but like, there were some pretty classic signs. But, I could tell from the corner of my eye, like, she was looking at her iPad the whole time, but she was looking at her character stuff.
Yeah.
Right? But, like, needed that level of distance, like also like didn't like a lot of eye contact and that, like that's fine, right? But when it got around to her turn, boom, she was ready to go because no one was harassing her to like put the iPad down, and like she was able to operate in her continuum. And these other kids, they all had paper character sheets. Like she was a little bit older. Like there was just an ability to differentiate for each person's need. And there isn't as much of that level of support, I think, in like PBTA kind of games or even a lot of story games, which assume a lot of knowledge about your ability to improv.
Yeah.
And so, or are the other side and they're spoon feeding you how to improv, right? Like I know a lot of folks, like I think the folks at CR struggled with Monster Hearts because they're great improvers already, and a lot of PBTA is explaining how to carry out the scene, right? And like, they already know how to do a scene. They need a mechanical component to resolve the part they don't know how to do, right? So that I don't think anybody disagrees that like their Monster Hearts thing didn't go that well. So I think they picked the wrong thing and the wrong, like whatever. It's not really criticism, but I think it went poorly because PBTA is not good at everything.
No, and it's not going to be. And then Monster Hearts specifically is a lot about telling you how your character emotionally reacts to something.
Right.
Which is like great if you don't already have a strong sense of how your character is going to emotionally react to something. But if
Right.
you want to deviate from that, Monster Hearts fights back.
Yeah. Yeah. Or you have to come at it like, I don't mind playing Monster Hearts because I will embrace the idea of I don't know how my character's going to react. And that's part of the fun, but I'm giving up that amount of player agency to see what happens with my character, right?
Mhm.
And I sort of like that feeling of like, I don't have to make all the decisions. Like, let's see. Oh, I'm mad. Okay, cool. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
And for, I think a lot of people, especially experienced improvers or actors or whatever, I think that sort of thing is harder to deal with than like, the thing you can't improv is like, does my sword hit them?
Yeah.
That, I don't know. That just seems like a component there that is worth balancing.
I mean, it's an interesting thing about what Al is saying about used to roleplay situations, which could be, if you're in the situation, like if your friend or your player who contacted you is in a situation where they want to teach kids about like, here's how we deal with something in real life. But it is a really fun thing to use TTRPGs to like explore our reactions to different situations in general, like in the kind of like safety of a sci-fi or Western or space opera kind of setting. And it doesn't, and at least to me, a lot of times, like in the stories that I've heard of people like teaching kids or playing in, like Clara would tell me a lot about when they were doing like an RPG summer camp, and they're all kinds of like, so I've heard different stories, but it's like you set up a thing and you think it's pretty cut and dry, and suddenly the kids have done like this massively different thing, and allowing them the freedom to do that and making it easy for them to go back and forth, like where it's like, okay, well, you've set up a scenario where it is like good guys versus some bad guys. The kids can surprise you, and making it as easy as possible for them to surprise you is part of the fun, I think, of RPGs in general. And it's an amazing thing to introduce to them. And looking at systems with less crunch in general is, I think, the way to go in this, and also just the way to go for kids. Most kids, like a lot of kids,
Yeah.
not just kids who may have like, challenges in different, like, in different aspects of learning or difficulties in reading and communication, because we want to get them hooked first and then GURPS them.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I say that I've never played GURPS. I've just been like by association.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I know about GURPS I learned from Happy Jacks. Get me that shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I GURPS has a lot of good ideas in it, but I will always be critical of a system that says we will be all things to all people, because I don't think that's good. Like I have the distinction between like, well, I don't want to get deep into the sauce with this, but the Thank you, chat. The philosophy I have is that sci-fi games should have more skills, and fantasy games should have more focus on your attributes or just will, because I think that's kind of a normal thing. I'm not going to get into all that here. Hit me up on Discord if you want to talk about it in the GM chat or rules chat or whatever. Just at me. I'm happy to come talk about stuff. That's fine. That's just a fun thing to think about.
Or if you have some deep insightful commentary on something that Jason or I said today, write us about it.
Yeah, that's great. Send us emails.
Send us emails.
Thank you for joining us for season 35, episode 5 of Happy Jack's RPG podcast. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Sam Dunwald. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and our other chat mods, and our amazing Patreon supporters who keep us ad-free and independent. We play what we want, when we want, and pants on, pants off. Nobody knows. Nobody knows if we're wearing pants. Go ahead to happyjacks.org/Patreon to support our pants optional lifestyles. I'm Jason.
I'm Pooja.
And I'm going to leave you with the same song we left you last episode because I couldn't figure out how to change the song. Love you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
There once was a ship that put to sea, and the name of the ship was the Billy of Tea. The winds blew up her bow, dipped down, oh blow, my bully boys blow. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. She had not been 2 weeks from shore when down on her a right whale bore. The captain called all hands and swore he'd take that whale in tow. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. Before the boat had hit the water, the whale's tail came up and caught her. All hands to the side, harpooned and fought her when she dived down low. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. No line was caught, the whale was freed. The captain's mind was not of greed, but he belonged to the wellerman's creed. He took that ship in tow. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. For 40 days or even more, the line went slack, then tight once more. All boats were lost, there were only 4, but still that whale did go. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. As far as I've heard, the fight's still on, the line's not cut, and the whale's not gone. The wellerman makes his regular call to encourage captain, crew, and all. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go. Soon may the wellerman come to bring us sugar and tea and rum. One day when the tonguing is done, we'll take our leave and go.